Okay. Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. I'm Curtis Samuel. I work with Touchwood Editions and the amazing Jules Sherred. And we'll be here having a little conversation, a little demo about his new book, CRIP UP THE KITCHEN. At first, I would like to acknowledge that this book was created on, and we are taking place today on the unceded territory of the Halkiyuminam speaking people, more specifically the Coetson Samuna Nation. And this is an important conversation today. I want us all to think about how we are gathering here on the unceded territory, and we're having a conversation today about accessibility and how to provide food for oneself. So I really just want us all to think about the lands that we are using and we are able to shop on and buy food and provide a sustenance meal. So just really want to take that into account in today's conversation. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are gathering here in a church today. So the Truth and Reconciliation is an ongoing process. It may cause some trauma for some people, so please take the moment and let us know if you need any conversation. This is important to Jules, and it's also an important part of the United Church of Canada's actively participating in the Truth and Reconciliation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jules Sherred, who is an award-winning commercial photographer and food stylist, author, journalist, and outspoken advocate for the disability and trans communities. His website, Disabled Kitchen and Garden, and his cookbook, CRIP UP THE KITCHEN, were born out of the need to include disabled people in the conversation around food. His new book, which is available at the back if you haven't purchased a copy yet. They are for sale from our lovely partners over at Volume 1 Bookstore, which is just down the street, as I'm sure most of you know. But CRIP UP THE KITCHEN, Tools and Tips and Recipes for the Disabled Cook is Jules's first book. He takes on the most ableist room in the house, which is the kitchen, with 50 recipes that make use of 3 key tools: the electric pressure cooker, air fryer, and bread machine. Jules has set out to make the kitchen accessible and enjoyable. The methods are developed specifically for the disabled and neurodivergent cook to make cooking at home inviting and accessible. So if you're someone who's craved the economy and satisfaction of cooking at home, but have been turned off by the ableist approach of many cookbooks, Jules has made this one just for you. So I will hand it over to Jules to tell us a little bit about what he'll be preparing.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. If I am not projecting loud enough, please let me know. Sometimes I'm really, really too loud, and sometimes I'm really, really too quiet. So let me know, and I will be happy to speak up. Same with for the people in the chat. If you cannot hear me, please let us know. Just a couple notes that we are live streaming and that there is a documentary being filmed about my work. And so if you, when it comes time to ask a question and you don't want your name being said, just let us know. If you don't want your face on the documentary afterwards, there are going to be some waivers to sign, so you have complete control over your privacy here. I'm having also a bad brain fog day, so please excuse me if I take a minute to find the word that my brain just cannot come up with. Today, I am cooking for you Digabor borscht. It is a recipe that has a lot of familial ties for me. It's really, really important. And it takes like 1,000 hours to cook. And that's a huge exaggeration. It's like 5 hours when my Nana would make it. And as I go through cooking it, I'm going to just talk about the steps a little bit more so you have a better fulsome idea. I'm going to talk about some other shortcuts that I tend to make that I didn't want to put in the cookbook because it would muddle neurodivergent brains and give them too much. But it's things that if you think you can take these shortcuts as you're making it, then it's just some extra tips. So this is the pot we're going to be using. It's a 6-quart. And what I like to do to make everything come to pressure quicker is I do some stuff from step 6 right away. I think it's step 6 anyway. I'm gonna put in a tablespoon of salt, a beet that has been peeled. Pardon?
Just the whole thing.
Just one whole beet. So with Dukkha borscht, it is not a beet soup. It is potatoes and cabbage and tomato. That's what so Dukkha is a Russian religious sect, and they came to Canada fleeing religious persecution in Russia. The government of Canada said, "Hey, come to Saskatchewan." And then they're like, "Actually, we don't want you here." And BC was like, "Hey, come to BC." And then some other things happened that weren't so great for the Dukkha people. And I have that story of how the colonization of Dukkha people when they came to Canada is in the book. So you can read more about that. But yeah, it's lots of cream, lots of butter, potatoes, tomatoes, and potatoes.
And you're putting whole potatoes in.
So these are, I'll do the quantities once I get to that step, but yeah, these are just whole potatoes cut in half, medium to large. 4 of them, cut them in half. I'm just putting it in the water now so that though it's hot and it will come to pressure quicker, because the hotter the ingredients are when you first start putting it all in there, the quicker it is to come to pressure. So this is just a little bit of extra prep before. I've mise en place all my ingredients because it takes 45 minutes to an hour to prep. And I will talk a little bit more about that as I get through it. But the first thing we're gonna do is in this 3-quart, I'm gonna turn it on to saute. And once it comes hot, I'm gonna actually skip a step. I'm not gonna wait for it to come hot. Put in a 1/4 cup of butter, a lot of butter, and I'm gonna add 3/4 cup of onions, and I'm going to add 1/4 cup green peppers and 1/2 cup of finely grated carrots. Now these are like zester finely grated. If you do not have a shredder that will make them this fine, you can do them any size. It just helps to get them to cook and become soft quickly. And we let this, I will be stirring it until the onions become translucent. You don't want to brown them. You just want everything, even the green peppers and the carrots will become a little bit more translucent. And we're just gonna let that happen. And Curtis is gonna ask me some questions while I'm dealing with this, or you also, if you have questions as we go along, you can ask them as well. Like do this, because this will take about 5 minutes to do this step, then Curtis can ask me questions.
Great. So again, when we have these little break periods, if anyone does have questions, feel free to put your hands up. But otherwise, I will lead the charge. So you did touch a little bit on the Dukkha side of things, but that was an important family tie recipe. So I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about why it was so important that you include this recipe in the book.
So growing up, my second dad, I had 4 dads growing up. So my second dad, he is Dukkha. And our summers were spent in Nelson, BC at his parents' house. In Nelson, BC, Grand Forks, Castlegar, that's where the majority of Dukkha people live in British Columbia. And if you ever go there, you need to have the borscht because it's nothing like it. And so my summers were spent there. My Deda, which is Russian for grandpa, he was a honey farmer. And my Baba, my grandmother, was a homemaker, but she also helped out in the farm as well. They had orchards, but their main crop was honey. And one of my favorite memories was waking up in the morning and my dad would be in the basement and he would be whipping the honey out of the honeycombs in these great big huge barrels. And we would have fresh honeycomb with our Red River cereal. That was our breakfast. Red River cereal and fresh honeycomb and honey from the bees that he would go and cultivate every single morning. And we would have other things like my we would spend, my cousins and us, we would spend a lot of time playing on the railroad tracks, which you weren't supposed to do. We would get in trouble when we were found out. But one of my favorite memories was my Baba spending hours upon hours sitting in the kitchen and preparing Digabor borscht for us. And it's one of those things, she would sit at her table and she would spend hours, like there's 5 cups of shredded cabbage in this recipe, and she didn't use a food processor. Like this was all a hand. And as I was prepping the ingredients yesterday, it took me, like even with a food processor, 15 minutes just to do the shredded cabbage. She took hours and hours and hours just doing this for us every day. You go to Digabor country in BC, and the economy is based off Digabor borscht, which the BC government was not happy about for a while. But it's an act of love having this, because it is so labor intensive. It is a dish that says I love you because someone has sitting down and taken 5 hours to prepare it for you. And then stuff happened in my life and I was cut off from that part of my culture. And when I got the Instapot and I learned how amazing it is and how I could reclaim things, one of my life goals was to be able to make Digabor borscht again. It took months because Digabor borscht has a very specific flavor profile, because the cabbage is prepared 2 different ways, carrots are prepared 2 different ways, the potatoes are prepared 2 different ways. I will talk about the next step, but it's like everything is prepared in such a way that they each contribute to the final flavor. And if you don't prepare it that way, then it's not going to taste the same. Doing it in Instapots instead of on the stove top is a different heat sources, different methods. And so, yeah, it was just one of those things where it took me like 6 months of trial and error to get it right. And finally, I got it right. And I cried that day because it had been, I think the last time I had Digabor borscht, I probably would have been 12 years old. And I cracked this nut in 2019. So I would have been 43. So from going from 12 years old to 43 without having it and then being able to have it again. And it's that kind of joy that I want people to be able to experience with the tips in my book, is being able to reclaim those things that are important to their souls that have that they've been cut off from. So with that, it's time to go to the next step, which is to take a can of crushed tomatoes, $7.96. Put it in there. In a traditional recipe, this is in another pot, and it would be a liter of stewing, like home canned tomatoes that are whole, and you would mash it with a masher, and you would cook it down until it became a thick broth or a thick consistency. We're doing a shortcut of using crushed tomatoes because it's basically the same thing, and it doesn't. But instead of doing it in separate pots, we're doing it all in one pot. So that's a deviation from the original recipe, and then we
In the saute.
yes, yeah, in the saute, in the 3-quart. And we also add another little quarter or a tablespoon of butter. More butter. There's lots of butter in here. And the remaining 1/4 cup of chopped onions, and we're going to cook that down until it is nice and thick. If you have any more questions for this, now is a good time to do that.
So Jules, you a
Mhm.
little bit of perusing.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Terry.
Hi.
I was quite fascinated by what you do in prepping, because you prepped for this, specifically for this, but this is not the way you would have approached making this at home. Can you share a little bit more about like how you prep a bag of onions, or like what?
Oh, yeah. So at home, what I do is every 2 weeks or so, I pre-chop and freeze often used ingredients in my house. And that's how I do meal planning and meal prep. I have like 8 or 9 staple recipes that I know that I love, and doesn't matter how I'm feeling, I know that I will want to eat them. And so I figured out what the core ingredients of those are. And so every 2 weeks, I will sit down, grab my food processor. I will chop a bag of medium onions, because medium onions is equivalent to about 1 cup. And I will chop those, put them in freezer containers or vacuum sealed bags, put them in the freezer. I do the same with gosh, green peppers. Those need to actually be in a vacuum sealed container, otherwise they lose their flavor if you freeze them any other way. Um, what else? Carrots. Just whatever I know I'm going to need in the month. I just sit down every 2 weeks, chop those, put them in the freezer, and anytime, oh yeah, like portion size of hamburger and chicken. And so when it's time to cook, everything's like frozen, and it doesn't matter what I want. I know I have the ingredients in the freezer, not in the fridge, where I know they're gonna end up in compost, because when you're chronically ill or chronically in pain, it's so unpredictable, whether or not you're going to even be able to cook for yourself. And so I just know that no matter how I'm feeling, and with the Instapot, you can cook from frozen. You don't have to wait for the food to defrost. It just takes an extra 5 minutes, time under pressure, for it to all cook. And so it's just, yeah, it's just really easy. Doesn't require as much planning or extra thought that goes into it. So
could you do that with cabbage? Could you?
yeah, I do it with cabbage too. It changes the flavor profile just a little bit once it's frozen, but not to such a degree that it's like unenjoyable. It just so yeah, I do that with my cabbage too. I will grab, but once a month is when I will do a head of cabbage, because a big head of cabbage will do 2 recipes, like a large head.
But it'll keep this much.
Yes, yeah. And so that's, yeah, I do that like once a month. Is I will prepare my cabbage, so I have that ready to go to if I feel like doing the extra labor for the borscht.
And actually just going off of that as well. So do you do prepped ingredients, and then do you also have like next step kind of, so like a tomato sauce or like
Well,
something that you've already built the blocks of?
yeah, so I have a spaghetti sauce recipe in the book, and it's a big, huge batch. And I do batch cooking, and then I jar my food. And so I also have a pantry full of prepared meals. So when I want spaghetti, we just have to have a jar of spaghetti sauce, cook the noodles, and it's done. Butter chicken, Thai, bunch of different Thai curries, butter chicken, chicken korma is often always in my pantry, prepped and pressure canned. So yeah, that's another thing that I do too. Is I always have, I try to. Sometimes it gets depleted because I get depleted and have bad months, but I always try to have at least 2 weeks of ingredients prepped and frozen, and at least 2 weeks of meals in my pantry. Ideally, I would have a month of meals in my pantry, but life happens, and that ideally doesn't always happen. So
And then why don't we touch on an important tool to this cookbook and to your cooking is the Instant Pot. And I do love your setup of the 2 different pots. And I'm wondering, how did you come up with that? Did you see someone and get inspired by that? How did that all come together?
Urvashi Peter is a pretty well-known cook, and she became famous for her Instapot butter chicken. And a friend of mine named John Kovalik wrote the foreword in my book, and it's because of him that I became familiar with Urvashi Peter. And I really didn't care about her recipe when I saw it, but I got curious about the Instapot, and she had a YouTube channel, and I started watching her cook on YouTube. And then she mentioned that she has mobility issues, specifically rheumatoid arthritis, and my disabilities mimic that. In fact, I was misdiagnosed with a form of inflammatory arthritis for a very, very long time because it mimicked it so much. And I just like, oh my God, I can do this like this. Why has nobody told me that the Instapot makes cooking like that much easier? Because everyone I knew was basically, the story is you need one, But then they would proceed to tell me all the things they hated about theirs. Like, you're not doing a really good job. I'm not gonna buy something you hate. Like, that's not how you evangelicalize something. So it took me watching another disabled person, and her focus wasn't on disability, but it was just knowing how rheumatoid arthritis affects people and seeing her being able to like not only cook, but produce cookbook after cookbook after cookbook. And I'm like, okay. And that's when I started doing the experimenting. But before we go on, it's time for me to move on to the next step. So I'm pressing cancel on the quick report. And this is being dumped in the container. It's the tomato and vegetables and everything. And then, Andrew, can you do me a favor? Can you rip me off a piece of paper towel? I do not do that. Make sure when you return it that you wipe off the rim. Turning it to the Instant Pot and setting this aside. In the 3/4 again, I am turning it back onto saute. I am adding another 1/4 cup of butter. You don't need to clean it out. You want the tomato in there. And then I am adding, sure, yeah, 2 cups of shredded cabbage. And I'm going to saute this down until it is tender. Tender is very subjective for different people. So I'm going to define tender. Tender in this instance is, I'm not going to taste it because I know what I feel when I'm stirring. Tender, you want it to be around just a little bit more juicy than al dente spaghetti. So you want it kind of translucent. You don't want it so soft that it falls apart. It still needs to have like that tender outside with a little bit of bite in the center. And so we're going to do this, and it's going to take about 5 minutes. Another thing that I'm going to skip ahead, another step as well, while I'm sauteing this, I am going to put half of the contents. So in this Instant Pot is 6 cups of water, 1 tablespoon of salt, 4 potatoes peeled, cut in half. And now I'm going to add, I'm missing one of my measuring cups, and that's fine. I will wing it. I'm going to add, this is approximately 1 liter when it's done. So I'm going to add 2 cups in here. It doesn't have to be exact. A little bit more.
And only Canadians work in cups and liters, I tell you. What cups is a liter?
I have actually in the cookbook both metric and imperial for people who work in both. So if you're unsure, like you don't have to flip to a conversion chart, which is not friendly when you're in the middle of cooking. So all the information is in the recipe. So you never have to like figure out like what do I need right here? It's there. Pale beet, that's in there too. Half a cup of chopped carrots and a 1/4 cup celery and half the sauce in step 4. Place lid and seal. Make sure that's, and then high pressure for 10 minutes. Cancel. Okay. Warm. And yeah, I always use manual pressure, high pressure if you want it. So I just press the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
10 minutes. Make sure the heat warm is off.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so it just depends. I have presets for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 30 minutes because that's like, and everyone can change their preset.
Well,
Yeah, so if you keep pressing the pressure cook button, it will cycle through 3 different times. And so if you were to cook it like at one of those presses, that 5 minutes is going to remember that the next time. If you wanted then again to have one of those presets for 10 minutes, because 5 and 10 are the most often that I use for my recipe, then you would press it 2 times and then use that second time at that other time and then repeat for the 3rd preset. So just whatever works for you. And you can meat and stew is also a high pressure setting. So if you needed more presets, you can cheat and use the meat and stew setting, because Meat and stew is pre-programmed by Instapot for specific times that they think is appropriate for meat and stew. You can ignore those and use your own preset times for it. Yeah, high pressure.
My trick, first time I got it, it's but happily cook something and thought, I'm gonna cook something else, completely forgot to. turn
Yes.
that vent
Yeah,
thing
to
on,
seal it, yes.
And vented, like, left the room.
Yeah, that happens. That happens. That's why in the front matter of the book, I have a checklist of things to do when you're cooking in the Instapot. And one of them is to check to make sure that the venting seal is closed. Another one is to make sure that if you're doing something like hard-boiled eggs in the Instapot, you've actually added the water. The number of times that we have forgotten to add the water in our house, and we've come back and we're like, and we think everything's cooked. We put the eggs in the cold water bath to stop the cooking process, and then we go to crack the egg, and it's raw egg all over the place. It happens. You just have to laugh about it, return everything back to the Instapot, and start again. But that's why I've included a checklist of things to check when you're cooking in the Instapot, just because things happen. So this is almost done. You can tell by the feel, and then no, that's fine. So do you have a
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And why are you doing the second one in the smaller Instapot?
It's just easier. If you had 2 6-quart, you could do it in 2 6-quarts, whatever you have. I just like using the 3-quart because the height is lower down and I can stir in a way that is ergonomical for my short body. If I also like, I'm using a drafting chair right now so I can lift it up and be able to like be at a height that is safe for cooking instead of being down. So it all depends on what works for you. If you have 2 6-quarts, then use the 6-quart.
I just couldn't understand where you get the smaller. pot.
We use it a lot for rice, I use it for chickpeas, for things that are smaller batches but most things like big batch, we use the 6. We also have an 8 that I use, but for smaller batch things, the 3-quart is really, really good. For doing grains, for doing, preparing like your beans, if you are cooking from like dry kidney beans, it's great for stuff like that. Yeah, that's why we have them. So we have like, this has to come to pressure and cook for 10 minutes. So we have I'm going to press cancel on this because it's done. And so we have I'm going to keep stirring. Here's another thing to remember. Once you press cancel, you have to keep stirring until it stops sizzling because then your food's going to burn. So, but it's done this step. So Curtis, if you have other questions.
Yeah. Any audience questions before? Oh, lovely.
Going right back to basics,
Mhm.
what is the difference between an instant pot and a pressure cooker?
So like pressure cooker on the stove and an Instapot electric are the same thing, except for safety. So on the stove, you have to babysit it a bit more. Someone has like, let's say 20 different safety features built in. So if your food starts to burn on the bottom, a burn notice goes off to let you know that it's burning. But if you are like out of the house and you don't know what's going off, eventually the Instapot will turn off if it's been on for too long so that your house cannot burn down. It has features where it will not explode, like it cannot come above the ideal pressure. It has like internal temperature sensors and pressure sensors so that it always is at the perfect pressure. It also makes things like there's an Instapot model that is made like certified for drying your food, and it keeps because when you're drying your food, you have to maintain a specific pressure, and if you go below that pressure, you have to start over again. So with the Instapot, you don't have to worry about those things. You don't have to worry about your house exploding because you didn't hear the rocker going when your Instapot or when your stovetop pressure cooker was going over. It also has low pressure settings, and you can do things in it really easily, like making cheese or yogurt. And so it's a little bit more versatile. It's safer. And it's not as heavy as a stove. Well, some of the stove top pressure cannons can be can be quite heavy, but in practice, like if you are used to cooking in a stovetop pressure cooker, then cooking in an Instapot will be really like second nature.
Sauces and meats and whatnot. In your.
I use a mix of a stovetop pressure canner, which I hate, only because I do like 8 jars at a time sometimes, and I need like I have an Instapot Max, which is the one that you can use for pressure canning, but you can only do small batches of 4 cans. And most of my recipes are like 6 to 8 500 milliliter jars. And sometimes I will do like 2 batches in a row in my Max just because I do not have any mental ability or physical ability to watch the stovetop one, because it does need to be watched, and my stove doesn't keep a really good, like finding the right temperature. And a lot of times I will like, okay, it's at 12 pounds, I can leave, and I come back in and it's at 8 pounds pressure. I'm like, well, there, I have to start all over again. So for people who like, I recommend the Max if you have the patience to do two or the like even the physical energy to do 2 in a row. Then and warm up the food before you start the drying process again, then I recommend the Max. The pressure canner brand that I have, Presto, they just created their electric version of their pressure canner has just been approved for use in Canada. You know, it's sold out. You still have to do some babysitting. Like you have to warm up the jars in it. Like they have the cycle that you have to go through. You can't just skip right to the canning step. You have to go through their whole warm the jars in here, clean your lids in here, all that stuff before they'll let you can it. But it again, it's one of those things where you can do up to 6 1-quart jars in it, which is basically a stovetop capacity. So it's one that I have on my wish list of things to try out next to see, even if it still requires a little bit more time overall to use, just not having to that whole babysitting factor and the stress of that alone is probably worth that extra cost of having one.
You got a 23 quart?
Yes. Yeah. So any other, yeah. Alex.
I have an Instant Pot, but I also know people who have an air fryer. Is that something
Yes.
that you've used, and can you explain the difference? I don't have an air fryer.
Yeah, so I have an air fryer. There's some air fryer recipes in the book. This is done with the lid on. So an air fryer is basically just a miniature convection oven. So it cooks with convection heat. It cooks things more evenly. You don't have to, like, if you want to deep fry, like, you don't have to deep fry, you just have to, like, brush it with your oil of choice. So it's, like, less fatty foods that you can do in it. Lots of crisp. It takes, like, 10, 15 minutes to do French fries. Like, it's some things are take a little bit more time. I have 2 oven ones that do rotisserie chickens in it, and I love doing a rotisserie chicken in my air fryer because it takes 20 some odd minutes to do a whole chicken. And it's nice and golden brown. It's like cooked well, like it's juicy because it self marinates itself as it's going. Baking in it there's some tricks to know about baking in it. But if you want to do like a roast in there or lower fat fried food, then it's really, really good for that. Because it is an oven and like times are not precise when you're cooking in an oven. You have to still like check it after so many minutes to see if it's done or not. So there's still a little bit more babysitting to it. That you have the same babysitting when you're cooking in an oven. But it's it's really good, especially for people who, like me, who no longer open up their oven doors because it's unsafe. So it's a nice little handy thing to have.
This is like the toaster oven
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, I have Instapot ones, like, so I have 4 air fryers. I am extra. I am extra. I don't do anything halfway. I'm all or nothing. So I have an 8-quart Instapot that has an air fryer lid. I have a Ninja Foodie, which is a combo Instapot and air fryer. And then I have 2 different type of oven style air fryers with convection. One is, I want to say 16 quarts and the other one is 22 quarts. Because I was finding when I was buying chickens via the Cow Up, the chickens were too big to fit in. So I needed a bigger, I needed a bigger air fryer to fit the plumpier farmed Cowichan chickens. And I also needed to test some extra appliances for the cookbook because not everyone's going to buy the big brand. So it was just like, okay, how do things work in different settings, and making sure that the recipes I was producing would work under a lot of different environments, because
But you don't have one of those air fryers where you kind of fit the basket into it from the side?
no, I don't have one of those. I have, so it's basically an Instapot, like the Ninja and the other. It's basically this, and the lid, it has an air fryer lid that you put on top. It works almost similar as the basket ones. It takes on average 2 minutes more to cook things in it than the oven ones. I don't know why that is, because with the oven ones, you have to let it preheat and put the food in. There's no preheating with this style because like it almost instantly, it's such a small confined space that basically instantly reaches temperature. And it, for whatever reason, it takes on average 2 minutes more for things to cook in this style rather than the oven style. So it's weird things that don't make sense, but it's good to know when you're shopping and like trying to figure out which one is best for me. Personally, I think the oven ones, because it's more versatile, especially with the rotisserie feature and being able to do rotisserie chickens. It also has like a fryer basket. So when you're doing your French fries, it will like really, really circulate them, or other things that you want to do that are that you want to have just a really nice heat around them, then the basket's just a really nice thing to have. So
Nice. And so that is actually one of the other tools that uses that's used in all of the recipes. And then I think we should touch on the last one, which is the bread machine.
machine. I love my bread machine. The bread machine also, I remember when they first came out, and I'm probably because it was new tech, and so it was like not great when they first came out, because I remember we had one in the 90s or like late 80s, early 90s. And my dad, third dad, got one because he loved to make bread, and he used it twice and it would like produce bricks. and then we never used it again. And so it took me a long time to get into that just because of that experience from when they first came out. Bread machines are great. It's even if you're like, you can do a regular loaf of bread. There's like jam recipes and stuff you can do in it too. But the thing that I love doing with I like doing cakes in the bread machine, like lemon loaf, like pound cakes and stuff like that. And I also like to do it when I'm doing donuts. So I will do the dough and have it mix in the bread machine, let it rise in the bread machine, and then I will air fry the donuts in my air fryer. So it's just one of those things that are just really nice to have. And there's, again, because I have issues with my hands. I have hands. No, that was right. Issues with my hands. I can't knead for a long time. So it's just one of those things that is really, really nice to have. Is it does all that work for you. You don't have to cook anything in it. You just set it to the dough cycle. So we'll just deal with the dough, let it rise, and then you can do with it what you want with afterwards.
Yeah. And
So you use it mostly as a dough maker.
Dough maker, and to do certain cakes. Like I do lemon pound cake in there. I do an orange. The ones that are in the recipes are in my book are the cakes that I do often. Then I also use it to make the dough for donuts.
Because it's the same as the Instant Pot. You set it and
Yeah.
walk away. and
Yeah.
In half an hour.
Yeah. So that's again, that's what I like about stuff like that, especially if you are someone where energy is a level, or energy levels are an issue, or even issues with concentration for whatever reason. It's just one of those things you don't have to think about it, and you don't have to worry that your house is going to burn down because you left the oven on. Because I know that's a thing for lots of different people, is that they leave the house and like, oh, did I leave the oven on? And they're all day having anxiety because they don't know if they left their oven on. It doesn't matter if you leave your Instapot on, and it doesn't matter if you leave your bread machine on. It does matter if you leave your air fryer on, though. But the other ones, they shut off automatically. So that one doesn't really matter either, because yeah, it's the automatic shut off. And so you don't really have to worry that your house is going to burn down while you're cooking because you lost concentration and things happen.
So I just want to go from the 3 tools, I think, to talking about how you talk about this in the book. And so how to make your kitchen more accessible. What are some tools and tricks you can give people? Maybe talk a little bit about the Instant Pot options, bread machines. You've kind of talked about that, but what is an affordable or way that people can go home and do?
How many people here have like an eating kitchen situation or like a little kitchen table that they can use? Yeah, so stop using your counters is my first. So there was a bit of, I'm going to explain my journey here. So we have a little nook in our kitchen stamp or stamp size kitchen that I would have it that I had a table at, and I would use actually like closet mate shoe racks because they're like $30 a piece, and I would have them on my table, and my Instapots would go on top of the shoe racks for vertical storage. I would use like the middle section to put spices. I had a trolley beside me that also housed like my onions, potatoes, more spices, like right beside me. And then behind me, I had tools. And so I would sit at my counter and I could rotate anywhere and everything that I needed was there and I could sit down and prep because that's what our grandmothers did. Like all kitchens used to have a prep table in them. And then for whatever reason, we decided that aesthetics was more important than function and prep tables no longer became the norm. Then I got my wheelchair, and even though the clearance between my fridge and the counter is technically within code, still cannot get my wheelchair safely around that corner, and I cannot open up the fridge and be in my chair at the same time. Which is a problem, and that's very common with kitchens, is that if you're a wheelchair user, there's not enough clearance, you can't get around it. So we're lucky enough that our house also has a dining room. So at the end of working on this cookbook, we moved all of that into the dining room, and now my dining room table is my kitchen table. And so I prep everything at my dining room table. Behind me is, again, that's where, like, behind me is my air fryers and my Instapots and my often used tools. And then I put everything in a bucket, and Andrew deals with the mess afterwards. So sit down. I know that's not feasible for everybody, but even, like, the great thing with the Instapot is that even if you have a space in your living room, like a coffee table, you could use that as a prep space, and you can put your Instapot on the coffee table and do everything in there. So it's easy that way. But wherever you can sit down and create a little work table and work area, the cart that I have that housed my spices and everything was like $60. You can get them also like in thrift stores. The one, like the big one that has cupboards and drawers. I think I got that for like $150 or $200 at Yisk. Like Yisk also has some really cheap things. I have my table's an IKEA table, but you can get used tables from the thrift store for like $15, $20 if budget's a real problem, and just wherever you can fit. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just as long as like even like 2x2 gives you enough area to have shoe racks to create some vertical storage, and then like a trolley or something to often use. And you just want to keep it to things that you use most often so that you're not hunting around and spending a lot of time trying to find things beforehand and wasting energy there. So it doesn't look pretty. It looks like clutter, but it works. And that's really what matters, is what works for you. And it doesn't need to be magazine ready. Like, we're not trying to be magazine ready here. We're trying to feed ourselves.
I was just gonna ask you, have you put any images of this up on your Instagram?
No.
Like, if you want
You-
to take pictures of it.
People will know. I don't know if I can talk about it. Can I talk about it, Curtis?
Yeah.
So CBC, well, Claudio Canada, Vancouver is coming to my house on Wednesday. CBC Victoria is coming to my house on Thursday. and they're going to be filming me in my prep area and interviewing me just about that little thing. And my prep area, my dining room has also turned into my photography studio. So there's like my big, huge prep table, and then all my photography equipment is right there. So I keep one area like to the side. So when it's this like prep station, cook station, photography station. So I have like this little and all my lighting and everything. It looks chaotic, but it works and it allows me to work and have a functional space and be able to still like not only do my job but also feed myself all in one thing.
Your job is
A photographer.
mostly food photography?
Yeah. That's my primary source of income is food photography. And I'm doing more writing. And so it's probably going to be like a 50-50 soon. But right now my primary is recipe development and food photography. I'm also working with Couch and Green Society, and we're right now busy applying for a bunch of grants to create programming specifically for disabled people. And our dream is to have like a kitchen where disabled people who cannot afford an Instapot, they can come in, they can use the Instapots at the food hub and cook there and have cooking classes. They come in with their recipes that they want converted to something disability friendly. I will make them recipes that are disability friendly, and just have just like that one little stop cooking classes that will both be like virtual and in person. So yeah, that's something that we're currently working to do as well because it's important. Yeah, and also a disability friendly garden space. There was a question down
Oh,
there.
I just want to say everything you talked about in the last 10 minutes or so, like that's my house. I don't use my dining room for dining. It's
Yeah.
my area.
Yeah.
And I'm neurodivergent, so if I don't see it, I don't
Yes.
have it. So I actually have like magnetic hooks,
Mhm.
all my favorite tools everywhere. Everything I have is clear, like I'm very slowly over time bought all the containers
Yeah.
I need. I have thrift store tables all over my place and yeah, I
Yeah.
have a workstation and it's just, it makes me feel good
Yeah.
to do that. It's-
Yeah,
that's
and
for other people too, so.
And you can tell like you've accomplished something. Like you just know having that. Like I can do something and I can accomplish, like there's a big, huge sense of accomplishment. It's a thing that like kind of bothers me about cooking culture. There's this attitude that if you don't do everything from scratch, you're not actually cooking, and it's like cheating and you're lazy. And my book specifically, like I call that attitude bullshit. Like there is a swear in my book, and I call it out because it is that. Like do what you need to do to feed yourself and have no shame in it. And like even if you're just throwing, like I have a tomato soup recipe that takes like 5 minutes to make, 5 minutes to prep, and it's really, really delicious. And if all you have that day is 5 minutes, at least you've accomplished something. So that's the thing that I want to like. What can you do within your limits? These are my limits today. So let's see what we can do. And no matter what, you succeed because you are listening to your body and you've accomplished something within that, and you're not pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion and energy or injury. Because that's when injury and stuff tends to happen, is when we try to push through. And so my message is don't push through. Like take it easy and figure out what you can do and just do that. And that's amazing. And even if you can't do anything that day, well, good for you for doing self-care and staying in bed. There's always tomorrow. So it's not the end of the world.
So speaking of that, here I am.
Mhm. Yes.
I don't know you from Adam. This part of the book I found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I will
So you
talk
wanna
about that. This is about to go off in a minute and it's gonna get really noisy in here for a minute.
when you let that off.
Yeah, I will talk about that next.
But
Yeah.
spoons are so important. and
Yeah.
stuff in that there, stuff-
Yeah, this is literally gonna go off in less than a minute. There we go. This is about to get really noisy. So here's another tip. When you buy your Instapot, you get these, like, this is a rice scooper and there's also like a ladle. What people don't know, like this hole right here, is to do this safely. It's to, you hook it around the hook to let off the steam. You just do like little tap. You just let it off slowly before you let it go. You have to make sure it's not going to spew out. And then we just, but that's what this is for. A lot of people don't know that. The first time I told Andrew, he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, So nobody reads the manual. So I'm here to tell you that this is what this is for. It's not just a rice scooper, it's also a tool.
Don't put this on your spice rack, which is -30.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to be clear from stuff over top of it, especially if you don't do the test, because if it's over full, food will come out through the vent and it will go all over your cabinets, all over like your ceiling, I was gonna call it a roof, but it will go everywhere. Yeah, Allison knows. That's why you do the test. And if the food is spewing, then you get your paper towel or your washcloth. You wet it really, really cold. You stick it on the metal part of the Instapot, and it helps to cool down the inside quicker because of the heat transfer, because that's what the letting pressure out is cooling down the steam. And so that helps to bring down the pressure faster if you put cold cloth on the metal part of your Instapot. And you will need to do it a couple times because it really, really quickly evaporates the water out of it. But it's that evaporation process, we're here for science too. It's that evaporation process that allows the steam to cool down faster. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought we could talk a little bit about the spoon theory.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for this to come out. I'm gonna do the next step and there will be another 5 minutes of cook and then we can talk about it. We're going over, I hope everyone's okay with that. Hopefully that lasts for the live stream. If the camera goes out, you'll still be able to hear me. But we might have to do a quick battery switch. Yeah. I meant to pack a whole bunch of extra batteries today. I packed all the food. I was so concerned to making sure that we left with everything that we needed to cook. I didn't double check my list to make sure that we left with everything we need to power that. So I apologize. This takes a long time. The more liquid there is, the longer it takes for it to depressurize.
Can you tell people how, it's the effective?
Well, there's a valve that is up when it's under pressure and it pops down. You'll hear a click. You'll all hear it, and the ceiling valve is down, and the Instapot also. That's another one of the safety mechanisms. You cannot open it when it's under pressure. It doesn't matter how much you try, it will not release the lid when it's under pressure because there's this little latch that locks when that thing is up. And so, I mean, yeah, there we go. Always open the lid out away from you. Don't reach over your pot is another safety tip. I've done that too often and have burns on the inside of my arm. So this is off. Remove the lid. Oh. Remove the potato. I meant to get those. There might be some chunks. So yeah, I'm just using a slotted ladle to count them when they come out to make sure you got them all. I like to think of it, this may be morbid, but it works for me. I like to think of it of like doing surgery and there's always a sponge count. There's a sponge nurse that counts every single sponge that goes in and counts every single sponge that comes out. So I'm at 5. And I just like to think about it like that. It just helps me, especially for people where object permanence is an issue. It just, if you're counted out 7, it helps to make sure that you've got everything. Put that aside for a second. Move the potatoes. Add, well, that's gonna go in here. I'm gonna skip the mashed potato step for a second. The 6th quart, I'll add the diced potatoes. So this is 1 cup of diced potatoes. And no, I'll do this actually. Diced potatoes and the remaining 3 cups cabbage. Yeah, but replace the lid. Sometimes it won't want to close because it's as soon as you the steam comes up. So make sure it's it's venting when you try to replace the lid. Seal it. high pressure 5 minutes. Oh, nope, not more. Keep warm. And mashed potatoes. Okay. So if you ever want the best mashed potatoes ever, cook your potatoes, boil your potatoes with a jar, like 156 millimeter can of tomato paste. And then once they're boiled, you want to mash your potatoes with a quarter cup of butter, half a cup of whipping cream. It's so good. Just wait, it's going to get better. A, a quarter cup of green peppers, a quarter cup of chopped green onion, a tablespoon of dill, and yeah, I'm gonna mash this and then set it aside.
Math?
Yeah, mashed potatoes, and they go back into this later. But it also, like these, it's so difficult for me when I'm doing this to not just sit down and eat the mashed potatoes and not afterwards. Because especially once you let them sit for like 5 minutes and it absorbs all the flavors and the green onions or green peppers get a little, they cook for a bit. So good. So good. Oh, and it like smells like just the dill. I'm like, okay, don't eat it. Just mash it. Yeah, so spoon theory. Let's go on to that while I'm mashing. So able people who do not have issues with fatigue, they have cupfuls of energy. And they can spend those cupfuls willy-nilly because it takes them really no amount of effort to replenish those cups. They may just like, I'm gonna sit down for 15 minutes and I have my second wind and I'm good to go. Those of us with a variety of disabilities that result in fatigue issues, we have spoonfuls of energy to spend. And it takes us a lot longer to replenish those spoons. So like I'm lucky to have 4 spoons of energy a day. I have to be very careful how out of 10. This is a out of 10. If I overdo it, sometimes the cost is me in bed for a week trying to recover. It's a lot. So I have to be very mindful how I spend those spoons. Because I want to be able to enjoy life. I want to not be crashing at 6 o'clock at night and missing out on life. So I have a system where I have figured out what I am able to do depending on how many spoons I have. The chart is in my cookbook, and it's what I used when I was developing the cookbook. It's there as an example. It's there as an example that you can like figure out your own. It takes a lot of trial and error to make it for you. But like if I wake up, and when it's time for me to start my workday, I assess how many spoons I have. And then based off of that number, I pick what I'm going to do that during my morning time. And then after lunch, I reassess. And if I still have some spoons left, then I pick some more activities. If I only have 1 spoon left, then I'm done for the day. Because the goal is to have 1 spoon left when you're finished your day. And then when my workday is over at 6 o'clock, I reassess. And again, the goal is to have 1 spoon left so I can enjoy my evenings and not be overwhelmed with fatigue and pain. And some days I'm overspent, and that's fine. I just have to re-examine where, I don't want to say where I went wrong, but where I was not being mindful and not listening to my body, and try again tomorrow. Like there's always tomorrow. And to take it one step further beyond what's in the book is every single week I set a priority for my week. So some weeks, like for my job, it may be, or when I was working on the cookbook, my priority this week is to write, or my priority this week is to work on photography, or my priority this week is meetings, whatever that is. And so when I am picking my activities for that time period, the first activity I pick has to do with what that priority is, and then everything else is secondary. And so there's some days where I'm only able to write 200 words, but at least that's 200 words written that I didn't write yesterday. Or I may, like, I know I have a meeting that day, so my priority that day is to be human. And that takes the most spoons. And if that's all that happens that day is 1 meeting, well, I made it through that 1 meeting. And I have something in reserve so I can do something for myself at the end of the day and not feel like a human pile of garbage. So that's how I manage it, and it works for me. And it's a very mindful approach. And again, it's all about, these are my limits. This is how I'm feeling today. What can I do within those boundaries so that I feel good about myself? So I have a sense of accomplishment. And at the same time, I am not hurting myself, and I'm being true to who I am and what my capabilities are. And there's nothing wrong with only being, I mean, there's some days where I'm lucky to take a shower, and yay, I showered. Like I got something done that day. And really, like, everyone asks, like, how did you do a cookbook? On a rush publication schedule to boot. I'm like, I know, isn't that wild? But it was because of the spoon chart and never doing more than what I'm capable of. And I actually have to give Curtis here props, because Touchwood has been really good about this. Like, if I'm overwhelmed with stuff, especially right now, like I have press every single day, like from now until early June. And if there's a day where I'm like, Curtis, I just can't, I just have to let him know, and he will let the outlet know. And like, I don't have to, like, they're also willing to work within that boundary, which is nice to have, because not everyone has that luxury when it comes to who they're working with. And so, and when I'm working with clients, that's the thing that I always ask them, like, do you need any accommodations? And I let them know that I'm autistic. I need 15 minutes every hour to myself so I don't have a meltdown and get angry. I need some quiet. I may need to lie down and do some stretching because I'm in too much pain. And those are things that I need. Is there anything that you need? You need the light dimmer, like, and I mentioned some things that they may not be thinking. It was like, oh yeah, I would like to work under low light. Is that possible when you're doing photography? I'm like, yeah, that's what lights are for. Like, totally, whatever you need, let's figure out how we can make that happen. So yeah, that's what that's all about. Any other questions?
I was thinking that maybe you could talk about some of the recipes other than the Dukeburg borscht that people can find in there, like some of your favorites, or a good place for people to start if they're just starting to cook.
So the recipes are divided in 3 sections. A little bit amount of effort, low spoons, moderate amount of effort, and then all your spoons. The low effort section is 5 to 15 minutes of prep. All the recipes are in order of how much time. So that's like where I would start, because they're all really easy. Like the tomato soup is throw in a can of diced tomatoes, some onions, some spices, cook it, put it in a blender, a heat safe blender, and you have yourself some tomato soup. You don't have to worry about too much about it. Favorite recipes? Do not enjoy that question because they're all in there for a reason. I love them all. It was really difficult to like pick ones that were appropriate. I mean, my effing good chili is one of my favorites. It's really good. Effing good chili. Jules says effing good chili is the title of it. It's really good. I like, just because of a little personal, I like the hamburger stew recipe that's in there. And that actually came from the United Church, kind of. It's my own version of it, but we used to have, growing up, the United Church women would, across Canada, would produce cookbooks for congregations to sell, and all the congregations would contribute recipes to it. And there were always like 5 different recipes for hamburger stew. And so it was one of those things where then I investigated the why hamburger stew was so, and a lot of those recipes came from Saskatchewan. I'm like, what's going on with hamburger stew in Saskatchewan? And it turns out it's because of the Dust Bowl, because it was really, really cheap, and it was something that people could eat during the Dust Bowl and the Depression. It turns out even with food inflation, it's still like $2 a portion right now. The Dukeburg borscht is, even with the sour cream and cheese, it's about $2, $2.50 for a portion right now. So there's a lot of like economically, but like easy, cheap recipes in the book. Hamburgers, yeah, just because of the history with the church. And it just fascinated, like, it's like, why, as an autistic kid who notices like pairings, and it just fascinated me, like, what's going on? This is weird. My butter chicken is really, really good. All the Punjabi food in there is just so good. I mean, all of it. Like that's like pick your favorite child. Let me know if you like this or not.
How many spoons for the Duke of Borscht?
How many spoons? This is all your spoons. Like
Yeah.
there's 4 recipes that are all your spoons. Samosa. And there's a story about the Gurdwara in Surrey and how they like spent thousands of dollars. They would cook, they loaded up these helicopters and they took it to Hope during the horrible winter of 2021 when we were all cut off. And it's not really so much the preparing, like the cooking of the samosa, it's the hours it takes to fold the samosa. That's where the spoons come in. There's matzo ball soup, and it's done kosher, which is really Passover. And the other one is dum biryani, and it's a yogurt one. And it just and it just takes so much to prepare it that like this alone, it says 45 minutes. Some days it takes me an hour just to chop all the vegetables for the digupur borscht. So, but they're important, right? They're the recipes that we can't live without. Like nothing says love than feeding somebody samosa or dukabor borscht or matzo ball soup. Like these are all dishes prepared with love and affection. And if people are serving them to you, that means they love you. And that's just overall with Sikh culture and Punjabi culture, like they cook for people out of love. I was adopted into a Punjabi household when I was a teenager before I was put in care. And that's why I know how to cook Punjabi food. But you go into Punjabi homes specifically, and it's a part of their philosophy is they feed you. And the philosophy is you take how much you need and you don't worry that you're taking too much. And if you try to refuse it, like that's like the worst insult you could give, especially from someone from this Sikh religion, is like you don't have to worry about their means. It's like you just go there and you eat. That's why they feed the community every single Saturday, and why their Gurdwara is open for anybody to come. It's like this is very foundational to their faith system that we feed people that we love. It's how we show love and caring is making sure that we're all nourished, not only our bodies but also our souls. So all the Punjabi food in there has that. I mean, all of it. Like if you were to I have some friends here that I used to cook for. They would come to my home. I would sit them down and I would cook for them for hours. And they're like, "Can we help you?" I'm like, "No, like you're my guest. Sit down." And then COVID came, and I haven't. This is the first time I've been able to cook for people since like for years and years and years. And this is my like all the recipes in here are like I love you, like, and this is my way of showing that I care. And I'm somewhat better with like I'm really bad at communicating with people. I can go years without saying hi to somebody. They know me, and they know that is nothing personal. It's just the way my autistic brains works. I don't think about reaching out because this is about to get loud again. But it's like being I don't care about them. But like this is how I show love, and this is how a lot of cultures. This is I grew up also surrounded by new Canadians, people literally who were like being shot at while they were leaving the former Czech Republic, like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and they came here, and the stories they were telling me, and they were like 3 or 4 when you left, and just the stories, but you would go to the house, new Canadians, you're struggling financially, but they would feed you, like that's you, and you cannot refuse, and so that's what I grew up in. And that's another, like, this is my way of saying I love you. And I hope that you're able to feed your body and your soul again. And I hope there's a tool in there that allows you to do that, because it really sucks when you're cut off from that. So they're all important to me. Like I can't tell me what, I can't divide up love. My brain doesn't work that way. So
I have a question about what happened to the beet in there. Does it kind
So
of
yeah, the
break
beef
down?
is flavor, and so the beef is in there. We take it out at the very last step,
Okay.
And it's in there to lend flavor and just give a subtle earthy flavoring to it. And then, yeah, and you take it out. It says in the recipe book to discard it. You all know we're gonna put it in our stomach. Like it tastes really, really good, but you don't. I mean, not everyone loves. I know a lot of people who are like, "Ew, borscht," because they don't like beef. So I'm like, no, no, no. This is not. Like, trust me, you have to have this. You unless you've been to Grand Forks or to Castlegar or to Nelson, you haven't had anything like this. And next time you go to that country, like go into a Dugabor restaurant and homemade bread, a nice bowl of Dugabor borscht, correctly, like they churn the butter that they serve you at some of the restaurants. And it's just, I mean, it's, if you're worried about saturated fat, I mean, it's a little up there, but also, I mean, studies about saturated fats are changing. Apparently, saturated fats in dairy is not the evil thing that we thought it was. So, I don't worry about it because dietitians say, you know what, it's probably not that bad after all. Just because the way that dairy is prepared, it neutralizes some of the harm that's in to other forms of saturated fat. So they're always, the science is always changing. It's more about what does your blood work say? What does your body say after you eat it? I'm not going to police what your food is healthy. I mean, it's all healthy. Everything is good in moderation. So, but if your cholesterol is not a worry, then like partake in that when you go to Grand Forks because it's good.
I noticed you don't, I always on my spots, I worry about these things, but
Mhm.
you, as when it beat, you just opened up you don't have to worry about turning it off or unplugging it.
No, it's already off. And there again, like it's a safety mechanism. Like you can't hurt yourself cooking with it. So there we go. Right. Right in?
Is that a deer?
And actually, so I mean, I talk about it in the book because the fear is real when it comes to cooking under pressure. But we have done so many wild things that you should never ever do. That like if a house was to burn up or burn down because of an Instapot, it would be our house. And so yeah, so the thing is off. Remove the lid. Oh, I still have more time. You know what? I'm gonna skip a step because we're going over. I'm taking out the beet. This is taking longer. I'm moving on to the very final. Putting in the rest of the sauce. Putting in the mashed potatoes. Actually, the cabbage goes in last. Putting in the mashed potatoes. Oh no, maybe we're here actually. Putting in potatoes. That goes in at the end. Okay, so yeah, 5 more minutes. What's a quick relief? Andrew, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but at least one more of the containers needs to be warmed up of the borscht, and I don't know. Take 5 minutes. That's right. 5 minutes, and then okay. Time. Sorry for keeping you all late. Yeah, can you grab one of the pots? Where can we plug that in? Will it reach the plug that's over there?
If you want me to just go in the kitchen and heat it up on the stove top.
What do you mean, Benny? You don't mind? Do you want to show her where the borscht is in the fridge? Just grab one of those pots.
Trying to fill one.
Yeah.
Something like that. You want to still use it then?
No, she knows how to use it.
I know how to
Or
use
you
it.
finish?
Yes, she's gonna deal with it. So that's very faithful or very thank you. Okay, so last round of cooking. Put in the mashed potatoes, 5 more minutes. You let it depressurize for 10 minutes. And then you throw everything that else is in here and you let it sit. but we're almost at the end. It did not take this long when I was timing it yesterday. I did 2 batches at home yesterday and it worked out great. Of course, it's not working out great today. I mean, it is flavor-wise, but time-wise, it's taking a bit longer than scheduled. So you guys are all awesome for sticking this out a little bit longer. And I know the smells are really, really good. That probably doesn't help. So I appreciate it. So any other questions? Yes.
I'm starting to get a little bit of arthritis in mine.
Mhm.
Did you find specific kitchen implements that work better? There's days like I can't grip a wooden spoon. for
Yeah.
that.
Yes. So OXO, OXO, good grips. They make, that's what my carrot peeler is like really, really big and thick. These tongs are OXO. I mean, with a quick release, they open, like you have to put barely any pressure. When I couldn't use both my thumbs, when I was waiting for surgery on them for like a year, I couldn't use either one of my thumbs. I was still able with my hand and with the meaty part of my palm, still able to grip it and have like my thumb kind of resting on the side, and we're still able to use these tongs. OXO also makes a great line of no slip cutting boards, so you don't have to worry about holding down your cutting board when you're chopping. For knives, I think it was taken away. Can't remember the brand, but it's sold at Canadian Tire and it starts with an H. They have a nice, like good, I guess it's called the heel, the handle, but it's really nicely weighted. And for like $40, you can get a really good chef's knife at Canadian Tire that just the slightest little pressure and it just slices through it with no. So yeah, OXO, and then I can remember the brand of the knife at Canadian Tire, but you can always email me and I can let you know. But yeah, I live and die by OXO, especially for like they saved me. That brand saved me during the year that I couldn't use my thumbs. So, and even with recovery, like I'm now developing really bad arthritis in both of my thumb joints, so I can't use my hands for too long. So, but they save me. And then like food processor and stuff like that, like you have to have. Any other questions?
There are audience questions.
Yeah.
I like what you said about always having a spoon left.
Mhm.
And you have the energy envelope they recommend for chronic fatigue and long bloated. Sort of, I missed it. I was wondering if you had any advice on like planning the whole, like, you need the ingredient and you need to cook before the ingredients go bad.
Yeah, so we did talk about that, but I'm happy to say it again. So what I do, hold on, my drafting chair is getting away from, whoops, wrong way. So what I do is every 2 weeks, I will chop a bag of onions, medium onions, because a medium onion is roughly a cup, and a lot of recipes call for 1 cup, and I freeze them. So everything that you can freeze, I freeze. Everything that I can jar, I jar. But I pick 8 to 9 recipes that you really, really like. Figure out, like, if you are, it's explained in the book, but if you're really good at it, you can get away with only cooking twice a week and you'll have enough food to last you for 40 meals is roughly, I have a template for that as well in the book. So just, I mean, 8 meals is a nice diverse meal, like set of meals. Yeah, so just go through. It takes a little work figuring out what those often used ingredients are, but you prepare them in the sizes that you need, and then you freeze them. Don't put them in your fridge because then they go in the bin. Another thing that I didn't mention is that, so any recipes that say call for half a cup of onion or half, like 250 kilograms of meat, like half of something, half of a quantity, double those recipes to whatever a whole is, so that you're not opening up, say, I know some recipes are like 200 milliliters of coconut milk. Well, a can of coconut milk is 400 milliliters. Double that, because you're never going to use the other 200 milliliters before it goes bad. Same with like anything that says like half an onion or half a cup of onion, because it's frozen in 1 cup portions, I'm going to double it and so that I'm using a whole package of something instead of part of a package of something and the rest going into the bin because I don't have the energy to cook it. Or I don't even, like my stomach is so unsettled that it's not even something that I could eat, even if I had the energy to eat it. So that's my biggest global tip for doing this stuff. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions?
I was gonna say, just based off of that, how
Mhm.
do you incorporate the grocery shopping aspect into your schedule? Like how often?
I shop online. And I do it, so I get, I do a lot of shopping at the co-op who's here and they're in the acknowledgements of my book, because a lot of the photography would not have been as beautiful if it weren't for the beautiful ingredients you can get at the co-op. For some people, price may be a little bit prohibitive, but there's like farmers markets and a lot of them now have delivery programs. There's a lot of like community grower like farms and stuff will now have ways of delivering food to you. But also Thrifty Foods has been delivering since like for years and years, like before even I've been ordering from Thrifties for delivery since like 2000 and I want to say 12. Like it's been a really, really long time. Now Savon does delivery. So we do most of our shopping online. And via places that we know that the shopper is going to be good. And I just know like the shopper knows me at Thrifty, so they already know what I will want for substitutions because I shop there so often. It also you don't have to worry about the noise and just the fatigue of going out. Again, it's a luxury because it is $10, but I do it every 2 weeks because that's when I do my major meal planning. And so I don't have to worry about having to shop so frequently because I'm not putting stuff in my fridge to go bad. I'm having it, I'm dealing with it, and then I'm pulling it out from the freezer as I need it. So, except for when I'm doing like food photography, and then it becomes a little bit more frequently, but that's a whole other story altogether. But for my own personal use, yeah, online shopping. And I like Thrifties for out of all of them, they have the best shoppers. And they have the best delivery people. So they're really nice. And Co-op too has really awesome. Co-op is great also because they work with the people who buy as well as the farmers. So if there isn't something that is there, you can email the Co-op and say, hey, it would be really awesome if, okay, this is burning and it should not be. Okay, cancel. That's fine. Of course, then we have to do this. Yeah, so the co-op, places like the co-op, they work with also buyers that if something's not there, they're gonna see if they can either source it or see if there's a farmer who's willing to grow it. So, and that's a really important thing for combating food insecurity is that food that people are eating is what's being grown locally. So that's one of the reasons why I like shopping at the co-op is just for that added, I would really like this to be in there. And they're like, well, let's see what we can do. So it's part of their mandate to help make sure that to combat food insecurity in the valley. So doesn't work for everybody because not everyone has the co-op, but the co-op also now delivers to Victoria and Nanaimo. So even if you're coming from south or north of the island, you can still shop online at the co-op and have their delicious food delivered like from local farmers delivered right to your door. So my plug for the co-op. So yeah, that's how I do it. Any other questions? Yes.
Freezer flop, like what are the ingredients you've ever produced because it's not worth it?
Hot pepper. Never, ever, ever freeze anything with spice. Because it will go bland, bland, bland. Bell, like sweet peppers, as long as you're vacuum sealing them, then it will retain the flavor. If you don't vacuum seal the bags, or even push out as much air as possible before freezing it, then they will go like mushy and gross and because they just, yeah, it's not fun. Those are like the big ones. If you're going to freeze, I mean, carrots you can freeze without blanching. Onions you can freeze without blanching. If you're going to freeze your peas, you might want to blanch them first, which is a whole extra step. But if you're going to do that, then just jar it. Like if you have the capacity to jar your food, pressure can it, then do that instead of freezing it because it also lasts longer. Because a freezer, depending on the type of freezer you have, it's 3 to 6 months. Where if you jar your food, it lasts for a year. So that's why I recommend jarring. It's just the longer the shelf life. And then with freezing, another thing is like the type of freezer you have to think about for how long your food's going to last. Like your fridge freezer, because it gets opened so much, depending on if it's the bottom or top, it loses its cooling quickly, also because it's front facing. Whereas in a chest freezer, your food lasts longer in a chest freezer. However, if you have mobility issues, getting into your chest freezer is an issue. So there's all these pros and cons to everything. I have a big, huge, like the size of a fridge freezer, just because I freeze so much that I need a big, huge. It's awesome that when you open the door and you shut the door again, it like creates a seal and quickly blasts everything with cold air, so that because it is a door one, everything that the cold air. But it's efficient in that as soon as you seal it, like you hear, like it creates like a quick vacuum and quickly blows in a blast of cold air to bring it back up. And it's less energy wasteful in that way. So you want to find, again, it's about cost and whether or not you can afford it. But if you can afford it, if you have the square footage in your house, then that's how you will want to go.
But I mean, like,
Yeah.
I need that more than.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Yeah. So, I mean, and also like in my dining room, that is now also my prep space, I have a little like tiny fridge. So stuff that I know is I'm going to be cooking, it gets moved from our main fridge in the kitchen into the little tiny fridge, big, huge freezers in there as well. So that everything that I need is like right there. And I don't have to like spend so much time like trying to find stuff or gather, like it's all there. I also have an IKEA cupboard. Like we have a big, huge walk-in pantry that's like the size of some people's walk-in closets. But I also have like an IKEA cupboard that also has pantry items like in my dining room, so that again, it's like storage of canned meals goes into our walk-in pantry, whereas canned goods that I use for cooking goes in the IKEA pantry that's in my dining room now. The last step, I am adding in another 1/4 cup of green peppers, 3/4 cup green onions, another tablespoon of dill, the cabbage that we made earlier, and another 1/2 cup of whipping cream. You need it. I mean, you could use whole milk if you're worried about all fat content, but you know what? You only live once, and the whipping cream helps to give it flavor. I know, Rhoda, you can't do it. Some people like to, I mean, you can do margarine instead of butter. I don't know if it's the casein you're allergic to, but margarine still has casein in it, so I don't know if that works for you, but some people gives it a completely different flavor. I know some people use coconut milk or instead of whipping cream. Not going to taste the same, but if it is something you wanted to try, that's the thing you can do as well. I also have food for you in the kitchen or in the fridge in there. So this, yeah, you add everything and you just let the flavors melt for like 5 minutes, and then you serve it with either cube cheddar cheese or sour cream and some extra dill to top it. And there's more cooking right now, and we'll be able to serve everybody really quickly. And there's some iced tea, because I know, or not iced tea, lemonade and ice, because it has been hot in here. And I thank you all for your patience as we've gone over. Is there any other questions about the book, about this dish?
And if there are any other questions, and if anyone would like to get their copy signed by Jules, we'll be signing copies. Volume 1 is at the back selling copies. And as I mentioned, and most of you know, just down the street, and they will have signed copies available at the store, so you can send friends and family. But otherwise, I think once we have the borscht ready there. You can help yourself to some lemonade and to some soup.
Mhm.
And
Can you put the ladle over there for when the borscht comes out? What did she say? Yeah. Not there yet? Okay, Andrew, then do you want to put this? Yeah, no, this is ready though, so we can move, transfer. I don't want to like dump it in the pot, but I do want to put the pot in the pot so that you can transfer it quickly. Can you bring the pot here? Put the ladle down for a second, because this, you need both hands. Yes. That. There we go. And put it over on the table. Put the ladle. Can you show? You do? The container, there's a container in the fridge for Rhoda, and there, is there a microwave in here, Rhoda?
Yes, there's.
Okay.
Closest.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And again, thank you. This has been, I mean, the last year and a half has been a lot for me. And I haven't had time for anybody because I've been working on this. I mean, so like I signed my publishing contract in November 2021, and the book went to print a year to the date of the signing the contract. Cookbooks usually take 3 years to produce, and I produced mine in 1 year. Like that's how. Oh my goodness. And then it's like I thought once it went to print, that's it. And then it's just been everything. Like it's a lot. A lot. And so I'm just thankful for everybody who's like been there and like supporting me either like directly or like just giving me my space to like ignore everybody and be like, I'm sorry, I love you, but I just have no time for you right now. Because I need to do this. And I hope that if it can't help you directly, I hope that you know somebody that it can help. And that's really I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that yeah, it's my presence. It's my way of saying that I love you all and thank you. And I hope that you can just cook, be merry, have fun, and thank you for coming. And I will be moving down there to sign copies. What? Huh? What? Yeah, bring out the cheese and the sour cream. And just put them there. And the borscht is over there to help yourself.
yeah, please don't be shy. Get some lemonade and borscht.
You all that.
And